What's up, Army? It's Jackie, also known as Jackie in the Soup, and welcome to Talk Bangtan to Me, a podcast all about BTS for Army. Whether you're a seasoned Army or just discovering the magic of Bangtan, this podcast is a space to celebrate the music, the moments, and the incredible impact BTS has on our lives. I'll be diving into the world of fandom, chatting with fellow Army, and sharing all the reasons why we love these 7 normal boys from Korea. So come into my own little magic shop and talk Bangtan to me. On today's episode, we're going to be talking all about biases, because this is probably one of the biggest decisions you will make when you enter the fandom, and there's a lot of layers to it. But first, I want to talk about the concept of OT7, because that is the absolute foundation of being an Army. You can't consider yourself an Army unless you are OT7. OT7 means one true 7. And quite simply, it just means love and support all members. I think we overthink it sometimes, but it's as simple as that. Love and support all members. I've kind of developed my own meaning for OT7, and I want to share what it means to me, because before you choose a bias, I believe falling in love with all 7 of them is most important. While yes, I define OT7 as loving and supporting all of the members, it's also knowing what each member contributes to the group and how important it is and how they cannot be BTS without all 7. However, that's not to say you can't have preferences about each member's musical styles and what they bring. They're so different. Some people like rap, some people like vocals. It really just depends. And I think that you can have these preferences and still be OT7. There's this misconception that OT7 means you have to blindly love every single thing every member does and all of their music styles and all of it. And you can never criticize or have a negative opinion on anything they do. And while it's absolutely not okay to shame any members or put them down or drag any of their works, you can support them while also giving feedback and giving your opinion and even admitting that it might not be your taste. I think the BTS members themselves would never want us to blindly love everything. I think as musicians who take their craft seriously, they would appreciate feedback. So maybe there is that one song that just didn't do it for you, or maybe one member's album wasn't your favorite. That's okay. And we can express that. We have to get away from thinking we can't express that. People will call you an anti or an OT6 or an OT5432, whatever it may be, simply for expressing an opinion. And that's ridiculous to me. So OT7 means showing up for every single member, regardless of personal preference or taste. No matter what album drops from a member, I'm there when it drops. I'm listening to it. I'm cheering them on, and I want them to have the greatest success that they can have with their project, even if it's not my favorite. So to me, that's what OT7 is. And that is something that takes time. It takes time to really get to know all the members, listen to their music, but you should come into the fandom knowing that you are going to be OT7. And that comes way before choosing the bias. I remember when I first started my Instagram, I was posting really heavy Taehyung and JK. And I remember getting criticism saying, you don't talk about the other members enough. First of all, I think that's naturally going to happen. I think you're naturally going to post and talk more about your bias or biases. But it's not up to anyone to tell me. I know I am OT7. I know it in my heart. And that is for you all to decide too. If you know in your heart that you're OT7, you can show a little more love to certain members. It's okay. It's totally okay. And it's interesting because even though that is the golden rule of being an Army, is that you must be OT7, we still have this unseen pressure to choose a bias really, really quickly. I remember when I came into the fandom, I was shocked. Every conversation I would have when I would meet a new Army, one of the first questions you get is, who's your bias? And I think this is because it's a way to connect with Army. It's a way for you to get to know each other. And I think people's bias says a lot about who they are. When someone shares their bias and maybe you have the same one, you kind of relate to each other. And You kind of carry it like a badge of honor. And I think we're all drawn to people that share the same bias as us. So it's a conversation starter. I know when I was getting those questions, I thought, oh crap, I need to get a bias. Who's my bias going to be? Who am I going to choose? And by then, I didn't really know all seven of them well yet. I was really new into the fandom. I was digging into the discography. So the first member that kind of caught my attention was Tay. And I'll be honest, it was because of his visuals. That was all I really knew at the time. I didn't know enough of their music or their personalities to really make a proper decision on who my bias is. So I just went with the most devastatingly beautiful one in my eyes and the one that I just couldn't stop looking at. And I chose Tay. And when you choose your bias, it's like, I don't know what it is. It's like choosing your partner to walk this Bangtan journey with. It is kind of like your identity. You start to identify with your bias. People start to associate you with your bias. The merch collecting starts. Armies love to gift each other things and they'll start sending you things of your bias. So it's like a commitment. It's like a real commitment. And sometimes I think that we jump the gun and we choose that bias so quick before we realize who our true bias really is based on their personality, their music, whatever it is that it may be. So I chose Tay. But as I got to know the members more and more, I realized there was another member that I was always looking for. I was always relating to. I loved everything this member did, and I just could not deny it anymore. And it was JK. I'm JK biased now, proud, and you will never get me off that man. He is my person. But for so long, because I chose Tay in the beginning, I was loyal. And people say, Jackie, it's not that deep. Actually, it is very deep. Like choosing a bias to me is like such an important decision. It matters to me. I don't know. I don't know if I'm crazy or what, but I have talked to other armies that kind of went through the same journey of wanting to change their bias, but feeling such a loyalty to their first bias that they just could not make that change and say it out loud. And it took me years to just come to terms with the fact that I chose a bias in the beginning because of visuals and because of what I saw on the outside. But my bias now is because that is the person who I feel connected to on a deep level. That is the person for me. I can't imagine having any other bias. And those who are really firm in their bias, particularly Namjoon stans and Yoongi stans, they are really, really loyal. They are the ones that are like, he is my bias and I'm never changing. That is how it feels when you find the right bias for you. You're just kind of stuck there. I think if you're cycling through and you say you have a different bias every day, or this one's your bias today, that it changes next month, I just think personally, you haven't found your bias yet. And that's okay. I don't know why we rush to claim it so early, especially when you're still falling in love with each member more and more and more and more. I think a great way to determine who your bias is to pay attention to yourself and pay attention to the one that you are most excited about when they do something. Who's the one that gets you really, really ramped up and excited? And the one that you can't take your eyes off of, the one that you're always looking for when there's content, the one that makes you feral, the one whose music you keep listening to, the one that is just always up in your face and making you crazy. Which member is that for you? Because you can choose a bias all day, but you're going to naturally gravitate to one. That's against your will. You're just going to gravitate towards one if you really pay attention to yourself outside of just looks. Looks is just a part of it. But there's going to be one that you feel like your soul matches the best. And you got to just come out of denial and say, okay, that is my bias. If everybody thinks that that's my bias and everybody's telling me this member is my bias, then obviously he probably is. And I'm just having a hard time admitting that. I'll tell you, as someone who came into the fandom a little later, like around the Dynamite era is when I came in, I look back at older eras and I think, man, if I came into the fandom then, a different member would have been my bias. If I would have come into the fandom during HYYH, Yoongi, he would have been my bias. I think in other eras, Jimin would have been my bias. It really just depends on who they were when you met them. In the Dynamite era, to me, I think that was Taehyung's era. I think he owned that. Just the style, the fashion, his hair, everything about Dynamite. How could you take your eyes off of Tae? And I think that's why I was so drawn to him. And I think even the solo eras, when you see them kind of grow and flourish in their solo eras, you're seeing different sides of them too. For me, JK's Golden really solidified him for me because that was just everything. But I don't know, Yoongi's D-Day tour and his trilogy really, really can get you thinking. I've seen some people changing to Yoongi biases in the past couple years, and it's probably because of his album and his evolution and the side of himself that he's shown us in this latest era. So does your bias choose you? Or do you choose your bias? I would say it could be both. I think I'm really jealous of the people that have come into the fandom. They were drawn to one. That was their man from day one, and it has never changed. I think that's amazing. And that happens. That definitely happens. I know stands of every member that they found them and that was it and it never changed. But I do think there is this concept of a bias choosing you because they just never get out of your head. They never leave you alone. You just can't stop thinking about them. It's like they are hunting you. It's hard to explain. But when I was standing Taehyung, I just felt JK choosing me over and over and over and over. And I was just resisting choosing him. And that happens for a lot of people. They start out with a bias and then they finally submit to who their bias actually should be. When you talk to armies and you start having a lot of relationships, there are some that will say they have a bias, but you can just tell who their real bias is. And maybe they don't know it yet. They're kind of on this journey, but I can look at someone and I can say, okay, they're saying their bias is Namjoon, but I can tell it's actually Yoongi. And that's what people said about me. I'm going around Taehyung, 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 and people are saying, it's actually JK. Like, when are you going to realize that? And I feel like I could pick up on that now. Having been in the fandom so many years, you notice that people carry qualities of their bias. It's just something that happens. It's pretty rare that I see someone who has a bias that is like totally out of left field. Usually there's some kind of trait, some emotional trait, something that causes them to align to that member. So I feel like I've been really good at picking that out. But I also think there's other layers of biases. I think you have your bias, the one that you tell people is your bias, but then you also have a music bias, one that you just are drawn to their art the most. For me, that's J-Hope. J-Hope is my music bias. Out of all the solo works, I am most drawn to his. I love his style, but he's not my bias. JK is definitely my bias. So I think you can have a music bias and a regular bias, and then the rest are just bias wreckers. I think you can have many bias wreckers. Because I couldn't just tell you one bias wrecker. I think I'm wrecked by a different one every single day. And those bias wreckers keep changing up all the time because they're all such amazing people and talented people that they come for us. Everybody's about to be wrecked by J-Hope because he is the one going on tour and he's super active right now. People were wrecked by Jin when he showed up out of the military and all that Gucci. It just kind of depends. So I think you can have many, many wreckers. Now, me personally, I think that you have one bias, one ultimate bias. Some people do not agree with me. Some people think that you can have 2, 3, 4, and that's your own personal choice. You can have as many as you want, but for me personally, I believe that there's always going to be one, even if you have 3 biases, there's always going to be one that kind of has a little bit more edge. And if you had to choose, it would be that one. And that is a debate I have with my friends over and over and over and over. But that's up to you. I'm not going to say there's a rule about how many biases you can have, but I am going to say, I think we need to take more time before we make that choice and not feel so pressured. And it should be okay to say, I don't have a bias yet because I'm still getting to know the members. But the concept of having a bias is really fun. I've never seen anything like it in my life. I've been in other fandoms and you choose favorite members, but your bias, the bias relationship is wild. It really is wild. Like I said, it becomes like an identity to you. Now, relationships with biases is different for everybody. I think we automatically assume a bias is someone that you're romantically drawn to. That's not always the case because we have armies from all different ages, people who are married, not married, and sometimes people don't have a romantic feeling towards their bias. Their bias is the one that they feel most protective over, or the one that is most like them in personality, or the one that they just are drawn to artistically. There's so many different types of bias relationships. I think the most common one is that you are just so down bad and you are so in love with your bias. Now, me, I'm just going to admit it. I am in love with JK. I mean, absolutely head over heels in love with him or in love with the concept of him. I don't know. And I think that's common for a lot of people. I think a lot of people are delulu over their bias, even if it's for fun. Now, there are some people that just take it way, 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 way too far. And they are way too delulu and territorial and all the things. But I think it's a really fun thing in the fandom to just be so down for your bias that you would risk it all and you're vocal about it, and all armies kind of feel the same way, and we just share in that. That's like the fun Delulu that I like. As I said on the first episode, I went through a divorce and stayed single for a long time and really just had no desire to date men. I had this really just disgusting taste in my mouth about men in general. I did not want to date. And JK is really showing me how it feels to be seen and loved and appreciated. He's the complete embodiment of love. And I'm okay with that right now. I'm okay with just enjoying that, enjoying his lives, enjoying just being Delulu for him. Some may say it's not healthy. I'm not crazy enough that I actually think that I will be single forever because I'm in love with him. Right now, I might say that, but I know that's not true. But he is filling a void right now that I don't feel like I could get anywhere else. He is satisfying a need. He provides companionship. He provides all the things that relationships give. And I think a lot of us can say that about our biases. They bring us a level of comfort to where we're okay with just feeling their love and pouring our love into them, as crazy as that sounds. So I kind of look at it as JK is changing how I feel about men. He is healing me in a sense. And I'm just going to sit with that for now because that is a huge gift that he doesn't even realize he's giving me and many, many others, I'm sure. And similarly with other members, Yoongi comes to mind, all of his trauma and all things he's been through. People who have been through similar situations really connect with him over that. Like, these are the things. We all have these reasons that we are drawn to our bias and that they fulfill us. I just realized that for anyone who was not an army that would just so happen to listen to this podcast, it's got to be absolutely insane to hear this conversation. I sometimes think about walking around with my cookie plushies or a JK photo card. And like, what are people thinking when they see this stuff? Like, unless you are in K-pop, it's a wild concept that you just have this person that's your man. They are your everything. And you always got to have some sort of representation on you of that member somewhere. Like, I have a hard time leaving the house if I don't have something JK, if I don't have a keychain or a shirt or something. He's everywhere. And that's what I mean. That's the bias relationship. So I guess in a nutshell, choosing a bias is a big decision. At least I think it is. And you shouldn't rush into it. And when you know and you are settled on your bias, you will be sat. You will be so sat, I promise you. It will not even be a question. It will be as natural as breathing when you find that right bias and you declare it. So for those of you that have your bias, I will see you on the Delulu side. For those of you that don't, continue getting to know them through their music, their albums, their content, and just wait for that day when it all becomes so clear. Okay, if I may switch gears, it has been a wild week. Just this past week, we went through Hope on the Stage ticketing, which was A bloodbath. It was an absolute bloodbath. This year it was different. This was the first tour where they didn't have this lottery system, which made it nearly impossible. While I love the idea of everybody having a shot, those queue numbers were insane. I think I was number 70,000, and you just wait and you wait and you wait, and there was no chance. There was no chance unless you got lucky and got a low queue number that you were getting anything through Ticketmaster. My last memory of ticketing was for the August D tour, and that was a lottery, and I was picked. The queue times were large, but you still had a chance. You still had a chance to get in, look at the tickets, and buy. It was a much smaller pool of people. This time, I just sat there watching my queue number not move. It just wasn't moving. And I was still 30 some thousand in line when it had been sold out. That is crazy. I can't believe that one member of BTS can sell out stadiums like that. And he could have done much bigger arenas. Yoongi could have too. Any member could. I don't know if it's because they are afraid of not selling it out. I feel like they're insecure maybe and don't think they can fill a stadium that big without their other members, but we would have sold out SoFi Stadium, no problem. But I'm so happy for him. J-Hope is probably overjoyed. Being in the military 2 years, almost 2 years, and then coming back and seeing that the fandom has never left his side. We will sell out tickets in 20 minutes to see him. I think if Jin came back and decided to do a tour, the same thing would have happened. And it will for any other members that decide to go on a tour if that's what they want to do. But yeah, this time it was StubHub to the rescue. It was resale. I went on an Instagram live and 400 people sat with me while I went through this process. And I was still in the queue. And I switched gears immediately and said, it's time to go to StubHub because this is never going to happen in Ticketmaster. And luckily, I got some tickets there. But from what I did see and hear is that the dynamic pricing was absolutely out of control. It was out of control. And it was for BTS as well. But I remember for Yoongi's tour, it just felt like the pricing was much more reasonable. I can't believe some of the dynamic pricing tickets or platinum pricing, whatever you want to call it, that Ticketmaster was doing. $800 to $900 for a seat on the lower level. That is so expensive and just unattainable for a lot of people unless you have a lot of income or a credit card or something. And that makes me sad. It feels like concerts have become a luxury. And it's only for the privileged to do. I personally am not even thinking about it. I'm choosing to block it out of my mind, what I have dropped on those tickets and the hotel and everything, especially knowing I'm going to Korea and BTS is coming back. And their tour is going to be the same thing. But gosh, I really hope something changes to where there's a cap on prices or maybe they change from going through Ticketmaster. I don't know. I doubt that's going to happen. We're all going to be paying these crazy prices for BTS too. But on the other hand, we've been waiting for this. This is all we've been waiting for. We've been through so much in the past 2 years. This is our moment. And I would rather dump $800 on a ticket than $800 on merch or other stuff throughout the year that I see BT21, this and that. This is where it matters to go see them live, not all the other materialistic things. So I choose to spend the money. I've never regretted a single penny I spent for Permission to Dance and August D. Never. Because that experience is unlike any other. And I've had people come to me saying, I have buyer's remorse. I can't believe I spent that. No, do not even have buyer's remorse. I understand. It's a lot of money to drop. But if you've never seen these members live before, trust me when I say you are not even going to be thinking about a single dime or regretting a single dime when you are in that room watching that performance. This tour is going to be amazing. The way Hobie performed in Paris with Mic Drop and his attitude on him, this is going to be really fire. I can't wait. And I keep saying that, but I truly think he's going to blow our minds because he is born to be on that stage. He is a natural. But for those of you that went through ticketing for the first time and you're traumatized, yeah, get used to it because that is how it is. That is how it is no matter what member is going on tour. Ticketing is like that. And we're not even going to get into what actual concert day is because that is a whole other set of chaos. But we'll get there. Ticketing was the first hurdle. You get your tickets. Now we prepare for the actual concert. I personally can't wait to meet so many people in Brooklyn. When August D's tour happened, I really didn't have a lot of people that I was talking to, maybe a handful, 10 or 15 people that I talk to on a regular basis. That number has grown so much, and it's going to be amazing to hug people and see people and enjoy it together. I'm so looking forward to it. Okay, it's that time again, the part of the podcast where I bring on a special guest of mine. And today I have Tammy with me. Those of you that have followed me probably have seen her in my stories or us tagging each other and whatnot. She's a really wonderful person. She's done some really amazing things for me, and I can't wait to hear her story and talk to her. So join me for my Army chat and song choice of the podcast. Hey, Tammy, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Bestie Jackie, what's up?
You all know her as Bestie Tammy. She's had a couple handles over the years. We were just talking about that offline. We were talking about how she used to be, what was it?
Yoon Jin.
Yoon Nam Jin. Speaking of biases, she had a handle with 3 different biases in it. We'll get to that. But I'm so happy to have you here. Thanks for joining me. We banter with each other all day on Instagram, going back and forth, but there's so much love and we have each other's backs completely. So why don't you start out with sharing your Army story and telling everyone how you came into the fandom?
Okay, I'm a Butter era. Heard Butter, really fell for it. I've always been a boy band fan from when I was a child. I grew up in the Boston area, so it was New Edition. Then it went to New Kids on the Block, where I totally lost my mind. And then it went to NSYNC. I've always said, if there's 5 guys who can sing and dance, I'm there. I'm buying the t-shirt. I'm listening to the songs. I am there. So yeah, when I heard Butter, I was like, oh, I like that. And like everyone else, just wanted to know who they were. And I kind of knew about them. And when I first saw them, I was like 7. Well, that's too many. That's not the menu. Like, that's not the recipe. There's too many. Can't keep track of them. Like, who's singing? And then, I remember talking to my nephew, who is a fan, and listening to Butter. I'm like, oh, listen to them try to rap. Isn't that so cute? Oh my gosh. Not knowing that there's like a whole rap line or anything.
They are like top of the game.
They
rappers.
are, but like listening to the song, I was like, oh, that's so cute. Look at them try. And then I saw Permission to Dance in the theater, and that kind of was like, all right, well, there's something more here. And then after that, I kind of fell down the YouTube rabbit hole, and it's been there ever since.
Yeah, it's almost like once you pique an interest in BTS, your algorithm changes completely. Like they start showing up on your YouTube, they show
Everywhere.
up everywhere, and you can't escape them. I liked boy bands too. I grew up in the 90s, so of course I did. And I liked Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, all them. But I think Trevor Noah said this. BTS is on a whole different level from a traditional boy band. You look at them and you're like, how did we let some of these boy bands get away with what because BTS is just, they've perfected every aspect of being a boy band. And I love what you said about Butter, because if you're brand new Army and you hear Butter and you hear, Ice on the wrist, I'm the nice guy, it's just such a silly, it is nothing compared to August D or any other raps he's done.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that. You're just like, oh, that's cute. And then you turn on Cypher Part 3 and you're like, whoa, okay.
Oh, they mean business. Okay.
Yes, they're actually top of their game.
Yeah.
So today on this episode of the podcast, it's been all about biases. And it made me think with the boy bands, we did have a favorite. Like there's always a favorite member, one that you kind of chose. But in my opinion, it's totally different than this concept of bias that we have in BTS. Like it's so much more intense. Like,
yeah.
It's actually an identity. So speaking of the bias, you kind of cycled through 3 biases to start. Jin, Namjoon, and Yoongi.
Yes.
But Namjoon is more of a music bias. And I said this a couple times on my Instagram, music bias. And they're like, baby armies are like, what's a music bias? And I'm like, well, your music bias is the one whose music that you're drawn to the most. And you had mentioned that you love Namjoon's solo works.
I think out of all the solo works, his are my favorite. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Namjoon just is something different. I've heard people say Namjoon is like a category of his own in a way when it comes to biases. Like he's the leader. He's like this top level person in BTS. I feel like we all have that. We have that for him and we have that for JK for sure. And what's going on with you and JK?
Listen, girl, everybody loves JK. He's ridiculously handsome, otherworldly talented. Everything he does, he masters to the point where it's like annoying. Like
Yes.
he's good at everything. But I don't like connect to him in a way that I do with Namjoon through his music and Yoongi just with who he is.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like there's something to be said about, the girls who like Yoongi are the ones who like whatever like have gone through pain that they'll never talk
Yeah.
about or will talk about and share with others. And, I think that's where it is for me. I feel weird saying it's a spiritual level, but it is in a way,
I've
for
heard
sure.
that a lot from Yoongi stans. I
Yeah.
mean, Yoongi stans
We're a different breed.
a different breed in so many ways, but Yoongi stans really do feel this like soul connection to
Yeah.
him. It's definitely spiritual on a spiritual level for a lot of people.
The one thing about Yoongi is, he seems so aloof. I call him my unbothered king because he's just so aloof, ambivalent. I don't know. Like I can't describe it. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he's there even when you don't think he's there. He's there.
He doesn't miss a thing. That's what drew me to him when I first saw BTS was that I loved how he just sat there with like a total blank look on his
Yeah.
face, uninterested, just
Like,
like,
why am I even here?
why am I here?
The stories of him saying, I just wanted to be a producer. I didn't want to do all this.
Mhm.
But yet, here he is killing dance challenges, though he's not a dancer.
Yeah, that's a bunch of BS. He's not a dancer.
The way he like takes care of them in the soup, cooking and taking care of them all and like making snacks in the middle of the night. And, you know what I mean? Like you just know that he's a protector. And that's how I feel about all my army friends.
Yes. Well, you definitely are. You definitely are like the mother protector. And I want to share with everyone here. Tammy is really important to me. We had a friendship for a while, but something that always sticks out to me with Tammy was when I was going through being canceled and I was isolated from my community. Tammy is one of the few that vocally stood up for me. She was not afraid of being canceled herself. She spoke up, she spoke out, she defended me, and I had left a community behind. I just disappeared. I deactivated without an explanation. And Tammy, you did your best to kind of collect the community and try and keep it together. You started a community to get them all talking and keeping them engaged. You started group chats to try and keep people together. And that meant so much to me because I don't think I realized when I was gone the effect it would have on people that used my account as kind of a safe space and a place to engage with people that was just suddenly gone.
Yeah.
And they had no way of connecting anymore.
I got a lot of DMs from people who had never spoken to me before, who I never engaged with. And they're like, please tell her that, we're here. Please tell her to come back. And that was a big wake up call to me too, is that, you know, just standing up for you, which is honestly what I would have done for anyone. I do not tolerate bullying. It does not happen on my watch. It just doesn't. I know how it feels. I've been there. It's isolative. It's lonely. You lose a part of yourself. You lose an identity. And when it gets really bad, you can lose your love of the subject, which in our case would be BTS. And I was so afraid that that was going to happen.
And it did. It actually did happen. I didn't listen to BTS the whole time that I had been inactive because it just kind of triggered things for me. I took a break. So I really appreciated that. Not only did you keep the community together as best you could, you also gave me like a tunnel back in. Like you created a space for me to come back. You made a super private channel for me to come in and just say hi to people when I was really afraid to even make any sort of moves anywhere on social media. I felt like you kind of like put a cloak around me and you're like, come back. Like I got you. I'm here. And I will never, ever forget that. That meant the world to me. I still appreciate that you're still trying to create safe spaces and positive communities because we need more of that We need more safe spaces in this fandom for sure. So you have your fan account, Bestie Tammy. Is that kind of just your place to just love BTS, or do you have plans to create content or things like that? What are your dreams in the BTS world? Do you have any?
If I really have any dreams per se, so I just got my degree a couple years ago. I finished my bachelor's degree. And the very last class I had before my degree was pop culture, popular culture. And I waited years for this class because I only did like a class a semester. So it took me a while to get there. And if anyone has ever done like online learning, the first week you're tasked with what's going to be your semester project. And so for mine, I chose BTS. My whole senior project was about BTS. I studied their impact on social media, their impact on sociology and South Korean culture, even down to the science of their music, like their musicality. Like I
Wow.
went through all of it. And, my paper was like 12 pages. So yeah, like it was like the most rewarding experience ever, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. You should post it. You should publish it on your account. I would love to read that because it is fascinating. It's like a social experiment, BTS.
I mean, everyone says they paved the way, they paved the way. They really legitimately changed social media and how fan interaction can make or break a band.
It's true because when you think about joining other fandoms, especially boy bands or pop, whatever you're into, this BTS and ARMY relationship is so special. I've never experienced a relationship like that with an artist where you truly do feel connected to them, close to them. You feel like you get each other, like truly, like BTS and ARMY feel like one to me. So we're at the part of the podcast where we talk about the song of the episode. Why don't you tell everybody what your song choice was for this episode?
Well, I have to say, first of all, I have to preface this with this was very, very hard to do because there's your favorite song, and then there's the song that resonates with you, and then there's one that you want to talk about, at least for
Right.
me, at least.
Right.
So I chose the song to talk about, Pied Piper. And when you approached me with this and you told me about the song, I was like, has anyone chose Pied Piper? And you were like, no. I was like, dibs. That's it. That's what we're talking about.
And I'm so excited about Pied Piper for you to talk about that because the first episode of the podcast was 4 o'clock, which is an amazing song.
Which I had never heard of. I'd never heard that
Oh,
one.
you never heard 4 o'clock? Amazing.
No.
So, yeah, I think that was the case for a lot of people because it's kind of one of those songs you have to go on the hunt for. Pied Piper is the opposite. I think the fandom has a lot of disagreements on things, but we can all collectively agree that Pied Piper and the performances of Pied Piper,
It's our thirst anthem.
it's the Thirst Anthem. It makes us all kind of react the same way. When you first hear that opening to the song, everybody just kind of stops and is on their knees.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, so first hearing it, you're like, this is a good song. Oh, okay. All right. Like I said to you, blood, sweat, and tears walked so that Pied Piper could run. You know what I
Yes.
mean? But then you see the performance and it a whole different song. It's a whole different meaning and it becomes a favorite. It's a song that you have to see the performance.
Yes, and we can agree we're talking about the Fifth Muster, right? We're talking about the Fifth Muster performance, and I told Tammy before we started recording that if I was a guest on this podcast, I would have chosen Dimple. And Dimple and Pied Piper go together like, I don't know,
Peanut butter and jelly.
peanut butter and jelly, exactly. Because of that Fifth Muster performance where they perform them back to back. It's just pure seduction across the board. Now, Pied Piper is seduction, but it's scolding at the same time.
So like you listen to it and it gets you. You watch it, it brings you in, and then you put the captions on and you read what they're singing to you.
Yes.
And you're like, these 7 men are gaslighting me. And I am totally okay with it.
Do it again.
Like, no, you need to do what you need to do. You need to get your work done. You need to do that. But come here. Come here. I'm your paradise.
I know you can't help it. I know you can't help what you like. And then at the Fifth Muster, when JK opens it up, obviously, JK Pied Piper.
He knew the assignment.
Yes.
So then the second verse starts. Taeyoung starts with the whisper, and then my
Oh,
man comes in.
sugar. Yeah.
and that's it.
Yes. Every single part in that song, every single member's part is perfect. I haven't met a single person that doesn't have that response to Pied Piper. It's one of the best, and it just never gets old either. That was only performed at Musters, I think. I have to look at that and fact check it, but that wasn't performed on
Probably
tours.
because they know it will ensue a riot.
Yeah. Yes, because it was on the Love Yourself album, Love Yourself Her, it was on, which is perfect because Love Yourself Her is all about kind of like new love and that feeling, and, like, then you have Pied Piper come in, like, "I'm taking over you," it just fits in there perfectly, and I think the song has always been good, but you're right, it was when they started performing that live that it really just gave that song a whole new life of its own.
Yeah, it's like I don't wanna say, like, it's a cult favorite, but it's in that vein.
It is, but yeah, that was a really great choice. I wish I can play it on here, but for copyright reasons, I can't. You chose Pied Piper because of the performances and it's fun to talk about, but what is your favorite BTS song?
My favorite BTS song is 24/7 Equals Heaven.
Yes, from Dark and Wild.
Yes, I love the energy of it, it makes me happy.
Yeah.
As soon as I hear it, the volume goes up. I just love that song.
I wanted you to speak on that because that's not a first choice that I hear a lot. When people say, "What's your favorite BTS song?" I don't think anybody's ever said that one. It's usually something pretty obvious. So that's interesting that that's your favorite. From an album that I think is slept on too. I think
Yeah,
not enough people talk about that album. If the new armies are listening and you haven't gone back into those early BTS days, their sound was pretty different than what it is now. Well, thank you for your song choice. That was a good one. And I just loved having you here. You'll be a recurring guest for sure.
that's
I'm going
good.
to go back to Instagram now and tease you about JK some more.
That's fine. Let's go.
Let's go. Damn it, Tammy.
And Jackie.
I hope you enjoyed talking biases with me. Episode 3 is going to be all about the taboos of the fandom. We're going to be talking about shipping, solo stands, anti-fans, and all the things that could really get you in trouble in this fandom. And is it really that deep? We'll see. For more fun in the fandom, follow me at Jackie in the Soup on Instagram. You can also follow the podcast at Talk Bangtan to Me Podcast. And I will see you in 2 weeks. Bora hey.